This next film, there might be some points of disagreement because I love it. I love it even more than The Mummy. I love it even more than The Invisible Man, but not as much as Dracula 1931.
Mm-hmm.
It was directed by Louis Friedlander in 1935, and the film is The Raven.
The Raven, another one, and it is a good movie.
Talk about what you don't like and what you do like.
I have the same objection.
Okay.
What I do like is I like the performances, the settings. Performances are absolutely wonderful. I don't like the fact of using Poe when it's not a Poe film.
Audiences might not understand this about me, but I'm not a Poe guy. I'm not
Yeah,
necessarily a horror guy. I'm a guy from crime who happens to love Dracula and the brushes painted by the horror genre in general. But what drew me in to this film is the performance of Bela Lugosi.
Bela's awesome in
this. You got to see his strength.
Yes.
His range as an actor. He is mad.
Mm-hmm.
It's such an evocative piece as Dr. Richard Vollen.
Well, poor Bela got the shaft. He really got the shaft in later films. He became one of the first, I believe, to be what we call typecast. And people expected Dracula, after that. And he was given some opportunities early on. We're talking about these in the early 30s. But later on, it seemed like all of these were swept under the rug, and Dracula was the only thing Bela could do. And he's very underrated. These films, granted, I'm not saying to not see these films. I'm just saying don't go into it thinking if you're a Poe fan, don't go into it thinking that you're going to see Edgar Allan Poe, because you're not. But do go and see these films for Bela not as Dracula, to see what else he can do.
Talk about Bela bringing the madness. Mm-hmm. He does it in this film.
Yeah.
It is gorgeous. The special effects were kind of but it really doesn't matter because Boris Karloff is another tragic figure,
mm-hmm.
but it also takes place in a house. There's beautiful music. It's such a wonderful piece. I give this a resounding 2 thumbs up. It is one of my favorite films of all time
mm-hmm. because
of the way it instills with the viewer. It's another one of those films that doesn't get the recognition that it deserves.
That's true.
In no way, shape, or form does it resemble Poe. But for me, that's a good thing. For you, it's a bad thing.
Well,
But for me, it's a wonderful thing because it's totally different. And the remake of The Raven with John Cusack could take a lesson from this. But I absolutely give it 2 thumbs up. Would you recommend it as a film, John?
I would recommend both of them, actually.
Really?
I would recommend them on their own merits.
Okay.
I think that anyone that is a fan of horror and of this particular time period in early Universal horror, if they haven't seen these, they need to.
But here's a challenge. Are there any of these films, save perhaps the 25 version of Phantom of the Opera, that stick to its original material?
No. There's not. Really and truly, there's not. At that time, I think we discussed a little bit ago, with Dracula, at that time they couldn't have filmed, something that was 100% Stoker or Mary Shelley or what have you. Matter of fact, even down, if we want to talk Frankenstein for just a moment, even the whole lab scene within that movie is not Mary Shelley. I mean, it's completely different than what she ever envisioned, I'm sure.
Speaking of which,
mm-hmm.
the same year, 1935, James Whale is back.
Ah, yes.
For the first sequel in this whole span of the Universal franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And some people say it's the defining film of the whole genre. It's 1935's The Bride of Frankenstein.
Ah, The Bride of Frankenstein. Now, this is a wonderful film. We open in this film by seeing the young Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley talking about this tale that she has crafted, because all these grown men, including her husband Percy Shelley and Lord Byron, are there, and they're all talking about how that little mind could think up something as dark as Frankenstein. So she then proceeds to tell the story of what happened next. And of course, she's played by Elsa Lanchester, who comes back a little later on in the film, and in another character, 2 characters. Great film. We're introduced to Dr. Pretorius, who's a very fascinating character, who kind of goads Henry along. That always bothered me. Henry instead of Victor. But, you got through it.
You did. One interesting tidbit about Dr. Pretorius, he was actually the first openly gay character portrayed in horror cinema. And the next year, there was also another pseudo-type of homosexual trope that was touched in Dracula's Daughter. But this film is really sad. It's tragic.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it talks about damaged people and where they want to go. They recast Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I think her performance was better.
I agree. And somebody else, Lawrence, that you see as well, calling down to her husband, Hans at the mill, is Mary Gordon.
Dr. Pretorius.
Yes, Dr. Pretorius. But Mary Gordon, you know who she would later go on to portray? In 12 films for Universal, Mrs. Hudson in the Sherlock Holmes series. So you get to see Mrs. Hudson, which is always great for me, being a Holmes fan as well. It's a great film. You've got some great actors that are filling cameo parts and so forth. Carradine's in this one as well as one of the hunters. You hear the monster speak. But when you're talking about the monster himself and this being a tale about people, the monster wants love. He wants somebody to call his own.
One of the saddest scenes I've ever seen in cinema history, and it's so moving. And this is really why we do this podcast. We talk about value. We talk about elements which really matter.
Yeah.
Friendship, kindness. But one of the most moving scenes I've ever seen in anything takes place in this film, where the blind man is praying and thanking God for a friend.
Yes.
Friendship.
As Ave Maria comes
sweet
up
that
in
is.
crescendo. Yeah.
That can't be understated.
It's wonderful. It's a wonderful scene, and it will bring a tear to your eye. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong with you.
That by itself, and this was in 1935, that by itself, you should watch the whole franchise just for that moment.
Yeah.
That moment by itself it lives forever. It's often imitated and never replicated.
Right.
Never. Because of that and so much more, because James Whale was pushing the censors, because he took a step up with a bigger budget, I absolutely give this a thumbs up and a seal of approval.
Oh, absolutely.
Another one, Universal, that's another notch under their belt.
Yeah.
They continue to tear it up.